Hey guys, so I got a ton of feedback from the last video I just posted about my predictions for the Tampa Pro and how I had Laura Lee winning, Jennifer second, and Issa in third. And then all of a sudden this morning, I've been getting this picture sent to me quite often, and I looked at it and I was shocked. This is Issa this morning. I am absolutely shocked at how she's looking right now. A huge difference, and I wanted to go into the changes that she's made and will it be enough at this point to win the show. But from what I was saying earlier, that it's the hardest thing to do is to bring someone down, and to bring them in better or bring them back where they were is the hardest thing to do, and it's going to take a few shows. It looks like they are about 90% away from doing exactly that. So I am shocked, absolutely shocked right now that Issa's bringing this package. And I wanted to go over her looks over the last couple years and where the mistakes were in the previous Olympia and what she's done to correct them since then. And she has absolutely done a remarkable job. Now, I will say in this picture here, it is clear that she still needs to load a little bit more. She's still a little bit flat. You could see it just in her waistline. You could see it in her, her ribs are a little bit showing here still. If you look over here, the detail is just, it's pretty strong here in the ribs, pretty strong here, and it's a lot softer over on this side. Now, if you look at her lats and how she was spreading them before with her arm out before as well, she is getting a lot better control of that. That has changed. Her signature pose where she really opened up her lats a lot, that has kind of stopped in the IFBB. They kind of have toned that down. You can see in her posing here, she's toned that down a little bit as well. But the improvements she's made is the things that I've always been looking at her physique and wondering when is she going to make those, and she absolutely made them. So let's look at the evolution of Issa from her winning the 2019 Olympia here. You could see, and remember how I said before, when you look at a professional bikini Olympia competitor at the highest level, you don't want to look at them and say, oh wow, her whatever is so amazing. I wish mine looked like that type of thing. Like, you don't want to look at someone and be like, her glutes are so good. I can't believe her glutes look like that and they pop out so much and they're just so remarkable. That stuff is for Instagram. That's for influencers and things like that. But on bikini stage, it's all about balance, proportions, symmetry. And yes, of course, they're going to have impressive things. Issa has an impressive waistline, but you don't look at her and just say, just the waistline. You look at everything and you're like, everything looks really good. You're not going to look at her physique and say, something stands out. And that's what's important with bikini. So that is meant as a compliment, not as an insult. I'm looking at her and I'm like, she's good from everywhere, and there's nothing that stands out from anywhere. So I always want to say, when I see a good bikini competitor, I want to say she's good from everywhere and not great from anywhere. That's what I want to say. And that's the highest compliment you can get. Now, when we look at her evolution from 2019 to 2020, you could see just how much muscle she put on, and even paid for just a hair in her conditioning, not a lot in her conditioning, but you could tell they were just pushing the fullness, and they pushed her to the absolute limit of her fullness. Her waistline was a little bit wider, her lats were significantly bigger, her shoulders were a lot bigger, even her arms were bigger, and you could really see that we really see it is in her legs and in the detail. If you look at Issa from show to show, you'll see the fluctuation happen the most in her bottom half of her body. You'll see a little bit more tightness at some shows, you'll see a little bit more size at some shows, and it's something that's, every competitor has their thing. It's always going to be, everyone's going to have their one thing. There's really not a competitor I've ever worked with that was just lost fat completely evenly, that loaded completely evenly. Everyone's going to have their thing, and it comes down to posing, how much you load, how big you get the muscles, knowing that you can't load as hard as you want to because maybe your legs get too big when you do, things like that. So you work around it, and as you get to work with the competitor for years and years, you can kind of find the best method for them. So looking at Issa of last year, obviously she was too big. She paid for it with winning the Olympia, going back to, winning the Olympia to 6th place, which is, is a huge crushing blow. And then she has been hard at work bringing her physique back to the 2019 Olympia, but with the improvements and standards of today. So let's go ahead and look at her improvements. I have some other competitors in here too. I'm doing this kind of rough because it just came out this morning and I didn't have time to make a nice, pretty edited video. So excuse the roughness of this. I wanted to get it to you because I was getting a lot of questions. So when Issa won the 2019 Olympia, remember how I said I want to see someone who's great, or good from everywhere and not great from anywhere. When I would look at Issa's backside, I would look at it and I would be like, okay, she's really balanced. I see it. you know, the hamstrings are perfectly dialed in. They're not separated. You're getting just a tiny bit of conditioning where it's like pushing the limits, just a tiny bit. The roundness to the hamstring is there, but you're not seeing like these grainy hamstrings. You don't see big adductors and those big deep V's that you look, you know, you'll see women who have those deep V's and they're really going after it and they want to push real hard and see that that's not going to win you an Olympia title. You know, you look at her legs and they have a nice taper to them, but there's no deep V, there's not a big adductor, there's roundness to the hamstring and detail to the hamstring without a crazy amount of separation. You look at the glute, and this is where I always thought Issa could improve. When I looked at her glutes from the backside, I was always like, you know, they're good and they're full, but she could have a lot more more impressive glutes from what I was seeing from her. Even when she won the Olympia, I always thought there just was a little bit more that could be there in the glutes. And this upper outer edge on her is always something that I wanted to see just a tiny bit more fullness on. And one thing I really wanted to see on her to to win an Olympia title, I thought would be to get just a little bit more of the tie-in. You know, but that was enough. She was the most balanced. You know, in the top 5, I would say in the tie-in department, she probably was probably 4th out of the top 5. But in terms of balance, the year that she won, she was 100% the best. So I think that that's the only area that she really needed to improve on dramatically to kind of be number 1 in that as well. You know, because she was, when you look at her body part wise, you're like number 1 in the waist, number 1 in balanced, you know, presentation, all that. You know, obviously they're all very close when it comes to presentation. And, you know, when you're talking suit, hair, makeup, tan, beauty, all that, they're all very close. When you look at her shoulder to waist ratio, she was probably number 1. Obviously with the V taper was number 1, but that's not really a judged thing as much anymore. So there was just a few things that she was number 1 on, number 3 on, number 2 on, and when you break her down. But on the glutes, I was always say she, out of the top 5, she was on that, you know, 4th, maybe even 5th out of the glute tie-ins and fullness. But now, this is what I'm seeing with Issa. Now, this year, so I didn't think they were going to be able to nail this the first time. The first time out, it's just so hard to do. And it's not a hit against them or anything like that. It's just so hard to do. It's hard to bring someone down in muscle, but then at the same time make improvements. That's what's really hard. And I know that her coming back and making a statement, she needed to have more glute tie-in, a more upper outer edge of the glute without squaring off too much. For her to kind of come back and say, hey, I'm back and I'm better. I just thought it was going to be too hard to do both, because you got to remember, you're talking about losing muscle while making improvements to fit a criteria and to match a look that you did before on your very first prep. I mean, when you start adding that up, it becomes pretty impossible. It's like, hey, we're going to need a couple shows type of thing. So I don't know what they did in the off season. If they did a few dry runs, they did a few like mock shows. I'll do that sometimes with people, and I'll be like, do like a pretend show where we're trying to hit a peak on a certain day and kind of find the problems. And on a big prep like this, where someone who's everyone's looking, it would make a lot of sense to do something like that. So my guess is that they went through a few dry runs, because to knock it out of the park like this is pretty crazy. You know, your first time back. So they probably did a couple dry runs. You know, that's what I think. I don't know any other way you would have nailed it like this. But let's look at the backside now of Issa today, this morning. Now, I will say, I do think that this is a flatter Issa. I think they're going to load her a little bit harder right now. You could just see that there's some more pop that she can have, and I'm curious if this is going to be kind of a curious thing, right? Are they going to fill her out 100%, or are they worried that she'll get too big if they fill out 100%? If you look at who she's next to, you know, and you compare just who she's next to, you look at Jennifer, you look at Laura Lee, Francesca, Daraja, I don't see it being an issue with you pushing the fullness a little bit because of how muscular those girls are. So I do think that you can get away with a little more, and you might want to err. With her being this lean, you could even err on the side of being a little fuller, because I don't think she has enough muscle now like she did before, where if you filled her out, she would look like that again. I think she would just be really balanced and competitive. But the main thing that I'm shocked with is these tie-ins. Look at these tie-ins. We're talking a day out, a little bit flat. I mean, not a lot flat, a little bit flat, compared to her winning the Olympia tie-ins. Look at the upper outer edge of that glute. It's craziness. I wonder if I can zoom in here. And again, sorry for the unprofessionalness of this video being so fast and just shooting it raw. So I'm going to shoot it and then just put it out. So look at this. Look at this craziness. I mean, I did not see that coming at all. You know, I just thought, hey, maybe she's just one of those girls that just can't get that tie-in so good, you know? I mean, she won the Olympia. She doesn't need a better tie-in than that if she's winning the Olympia with it. But bam, look at that. And that's without a tan and without good lighting. that lighting is pretty much straight on from the window. This lighting is from above, and it's going to make it look even better. So she looks better than this, actually. Craziness. Now, remember what I talked about, that upper outer edge? Look at this upper outer edge of her glute. It's full. It's dramatically improved. It's not too much, but it's getting there. You know, it's right at the limit, and that's where you want to be. You want to be at that limit on the glutes when a judge is going to tell you, this is what you want from the judge. You want the judge to kind of be like, and this has happened to me with Sandy a couple times too, where she'll be like, Adam, I don't want you to get her any leaner, but I don't want to tell you to get her any softer, or I don't want you to tell her, you know. So I guess that's kind of where she should be. That's kind of like how you get, she's like, I guess that makes that's where she should be. That's kind of like where it is. So with her glutes, you want to kind of get the same type of feedback where the judge will be like, you know, I don't want her to get any bigger in the glutes. I don't want her to get any smaller in the glutes, but just be careful kind of thing. It's right at that, walking that limit. And I think that she's walking that limit right now, you know, to today's bikini standard. Now, today's bikini standard is a lot crazier than it was a few years ago too. So she had to improve regardless. But that was something I did want to see from her a couple years ago. And now it's like, geez, you know, it's right on. It is right on. And that is going to push her. I think it's going to push her up. And honestly, I don't know if she's the top contender right now for the show. I would like to see how she fills out. But she's still got a little bit of filling out to do. I'm curious if when she does, if this is going to disappear at all. But I think that she could be just a tiny bit fuller. But obviously, she's got like 40 hours before she got on stage when she took this picture. So they're obviously still doing work. She's probably already dramatically improved from here. So this changes really everything. It changes everything. So now let's go ahead and look at just a quick breakdown of her next to Laura Lee and how I think the show is going to go down. So here's some pictures of Laura Lee from the 2019 Olympia to the Chicago Pro, where she basically broke the internet when she came out. Now, let's look at the improvements that Laura Lee's made, especially from the backside. You can clearly see a little bit bigger, get these pen right, a little bit bigger in the legs, which is something that they asked for, a tiny bit bigger in the legs, and then a little bit bigger in the glutes. And a pretty significant jump in the glutes in terms of the detail, the fullness and roundness of the glutes. You can even see the quads. If you come off the side of the quad, you pull this up a little bit bigger. If you look at the side of the quad here, where the quad comes down, you know, it's not an overdeveloped quad by any means, but it is clearly a very muscular quad. You know, and if you look here, even if you look specifically, and here's some of the good areas you want to look at. So in this area here, like you see how the detail of the quad kind of pops out a little bit now off the leg here? So look at that area there and then look at it here. It's pretty significant on how much more development that she has in her quad there, and in her conditioning is a little bit tighter too. It's not a dramatic difference in how much tighter she is. She is leaner, but she's not dramatically leaner. Now, we know from the past, the judges don't really want her to be completely shredded. Laura Lee's thing is fullness and pop, right? She's not going to be the driest competitor, and that's on purpose. So that's what they like from her. But if you let's look at the detail of her glute tie-ins, and that comes from a little bit of conditioning, but a lot of development, especially this upper outer edge too. It's clearly developed a lot more. So that's where they spent a lot of their time in the improvement. She's been hard at work developing those glutes and hamstrings and legs too. And you can see even more even in the hamstrings. There's more roundness to the hamstrings, more fullness to the hamstrings, but there's not more separation or more detail to the hamstring, which is important in bikini. Another thing too, the adductors. The adductors are not improved from last year, which they did not need to be improved from last year. You don't want bigger adductors. So all of this comes from mainly her quads, and then her glute development has been, just off the wall. It's been absolutely insane how much glute development that she's had. So this upper outer edge where it comes off, it is setting a new standard for bikini. Now, here's where it's going to become an issue when it comes next to her. Is it too much? It's clearly enough. They're not going to be saying she needs more glutes now. But when they talk about total package and balance, who wins from total package and balance now? Now, I will say that Laura Lee, when you look at her, especially with this new package that she brought out, it is a bit wow, right? It's very wow. It's hard to deny the wowness of this physique. When she comes out, it's like, whoa. Like, how does a human look like that, right? It's craziness. She is, a remarkable specimen. Now, when you look at her, though, you do say her glutes are crazy impressive, right? And remember what I said, you don't really want in bikini to be saying this one body part on her is that one crazy body part. Now, the thing is, you have the wow factor though, right? She has the height, she has the balance, she has the tiny waistline, the wide shoulders, the beauty, and then she does have the glutes, which are a plus to some and a minus to others. And in subjectivity of bikini, do you go for perfect balance or do you go for wow, right? Because it is impossible not to look at her and say that's impressive. And that's where I think she won the last show too. And they did tell her she was a little bit bigger, a little bit too big in the glutes and legs, and they wanted her to come down just a hair. Now I have talked to Laura Lee. They are a little bit smaller for this show in terms of weight. She's down a few pounds. So we will see if they're bringing it back. Now the other thing too is I also talked to James, and they're adjusting her posing so this won't be so dramatic anymore either. So it is going to be a real dogfight. Now let's go ahead and look at her next to Issa. Okay, so now we got Laura Lee next to Issa, and when you're looking at the difference between the two, when you look at them from the front, you know, when you're talking about balance, waistline ratios, you know, shoulder to waist, and impressiveness, there's really not a huge difference in terms of like the impressiveness. They're both crazy impressive. You're not seeing a dramatic difference between the two. Actually, you know what? Might be better if I do it this way. Okay, so you're not seeing a dramatic difference where you're going to be like, you know, this one's clearly much better. Now what you do see, which is quite obvious, is the glutes on Laura Lee in this front pose are significantly larger than the glutes on Issa. Now, it's not, you can't deny the balance is better on Issa than it is on Laura Lee. There's no denying that in terms of like the glutes, because that's the one muscle. Now, are they going to adjust for that? Are they going to, you know, shove her hips farther back, her glutes farther back this way, and not give such a profile on that glute to offset that? You know, looking at these pictures, I would imagine that you're going to see slightly different tweak in the posing, and she won't be sitting so hard in that glute to create a better balance from the front line, because this is definitely an obvious factor from the front if that might hurt her. Now, it could also win for her too when the judges see that and they can't deny the development, you know, because your eye goes right there. Now, from the front, it's going to be very, very close, and I think that's the only deciding factor really between the two. In terms of balance, I'd have to give it to Issa. In terms of the wow factor, you have to give it to Laura Lee. And but what is more bikini about? Is it a bikini more about wow? Is it more about balance? And the answer to that is it's more about balance. So now let's go ahead and look at them from the back. Now, from the back, there is, you know, in terms of like development and in terms of balance, again, it's going to be one of those things. Who is more powerful from the back? Clearly, Laura Lee's more powerful from the back. She's definitely more wow from the back. And then when you look at like balance, again, Issa is more balanced from the back. Now, here's one thing. I do know they've been working on this back pose already on making it not so poppy. This one they can control probably, you know, not as easy as the front one of being so poppy, but I know that they can control this a lot. And I think that they're going to bring this down and tone this down for the show. And when it comes to overall wow factor, I would give this one to Laura Lee from the back. And honestly, this shot from the back, I would give to Laura Lee just based on pure development, pure shape. If she can control not pushing so hard and not making it so big from the back. But it's a really close argument. So this is kind of how I would have it going down. I would have Issa winning from the front, and I would have Laura Lee winning from the back. And then it's going to come down to the little things, you know, the presentation, the poise, and you're talking about two of the best posers out there. You know, Laura Lee's posing is, you know, they're both actually slower posing routines, but Laura Lee's is more of that kind of fitness model, sexier posing routine. Issa's is similar, but you definitely have to give it to Laura Lee in terms of the posing from that front pose. It's just smooth, and it's just an awesome posing routine. So it's going to be very, very close. I haven't seen anything from Jennifer in terms of physique in the last few weeks, or in the last week, I should say. The only thing that we've seen from, let me see if I can pull this up. The only thing I've been seeing from Jennifer has been this ab shot that they kind of posted the other day. Mark posted this on his page. So yeah, she's absolutely diced and detailed from her core, but that is not really the concern with Jennifer. She always holds a really tight core. It really comes down to the legs and the detail of the legs. So is she going to be conditioned and take the crown from these two? Or is Issa good enough now where she can push all of them down? And the other question becomes, is Laura Lee so developed? Let's say Jennifer brings 100% conditioning, which she's on track to. I'd love to see what her legs look like. If she brings 100% conditioning, can she pass Issa at her new and improved, clearly the best that she's been, and say, hey, I was number 2 last year, and I'm going to be number 1 this year. Spots 1, 3, and 4 are vacated, and I am taking that first place. Or will Issa come back into the mix and say, no, I'm back. I made a mistake, and this is my show. It could change everything how Issa's looking right now. And then the other thing that it makes a change to as well is there's a few factors that are going to go into this that are going to be some kind of dramatic changes for this show. So one of them is the approach that Daraja is going to have too. Daraja is kind of going in, and I think that the consensus from everyone around is that she is going to be probably in that 4th spot. She's going to be in that first call out, but these bigger names keep pushing her down when she gets in those bigger shows. So she got beat by Maureen the other week, and so it goes, okay, what does Daraja have to lose? Should she just go for it at this stage? And I think that's going through their head over there in that camp, because it's kind of like there's really no losing in that situation of going for it at this stage. Everyone kind of thinks you're going to be 4th. The concentration is going to be on the top 3 big names that are there. And so if you decide, hey, I'm going to just go for it, and if it goes bad, then it goes bad. Whatever, it's not going to be a huge hit because people kind of had you in that 4th position anyway. But it also could be an approach where you say, hey, let's just go for it. Whatever happens, happens. Let's take a gamble, and then you can end up winning the whole show, right? Because you tried something you didn't do. Maybe you go for extra in fullness, or maybe you go for extra dryness, or whatever it is you're going for that you have been kind of maybe conservative on a little bit. There's always that, what if we went harder here? What if we went harder there? So it changes the show in that capacity with their mindset going into it, because it's kind of like a no-lose situation. If you get, it doesn't, she's already qualified for the Olympia. People are kind of thinking, oh, she's probably going to go 4th because at the bigger shows, she's kind of gone, losing to these bigger names. So should you go for it? Should you take that risk at this show and then maybe even come in and win the whole show, right? The other thing it does is it gives a lot of, I think it gives a lot more pull to Francesca. Francesca always pulls together a physique that is really, really tight. I mean, it's crazy conditioned. It's pretty muscular. I mean, you're even talking, I've seen her with quad striations, like full-on quad striations in that front pose before. So for me, because I'm pretty stuck to a certain bikini standard, that seems like it's pushing it too much. It seems like her conditioning is always just a little bit too far. But the judges like her that way. It's one of those things. When the judges like you a certain way, you kind of get stuck to that way. As we talked about Laura Lee, they like her a little bit softer. She couldn't come in as shredded as a Francesca and do better, right? And the same thing with Francesca. She couldn't come in as softer as like a Laura Lee or a Jennifer or something like that, because it wouldn't work for her physique. So this is another gamble for her where she could say, hey, you know what? People kind of have me in that 5th, 6th position. Maybe I should just go for it this time and try something different too and bring a different package, a different look. For her, maybe it would be more fuller because I don't think she can get any tighter. So maybe she can just push the fullness and see how that goes for her against the bigger names and maybe creep into the top 3. I think that with her physique being as lean as it is usually, and with Issa now looking the way she does, it actually helps her with her placing at this show, because the more petite structures are, I think, going to do better now. So with Issa looking this way, she's obviously a petite structure. Jennifer and Laura Lee are not the petite structure. They'd be kind of more of the medium build in terms of bikini. But Francesca is more of that petite structure, which matches more of the Issa lines, right? And Daraja's kind of right in the middle of those two, the kind of this right in between, like small, medium, right? So the way that the structures line up, I think that it helps Francesca creep in a little bit, especially with the conditioning that Issa's bringing. So now you have 2 girls that are kind of petite, that are really conditioned, that are good balance. Now, how far is Francesca going to push it? And can she crawl into maybe even the 4th spot, or even surprise everyone and bring a look that we haven't seen before and win the whole show? So things changed dramatically this morning. I was pretty sure on my predictions yesterday, but got to give it to Issa. She changed that up with one picture. So yeah, that being said, we're going to leave it right there. Sorry, this one's so quick, and I will talk to you guys later.